Hello again. During this period of self-isolation, one of the things I've been doing is thinking about people who were cut off from normal human society and whose stories have become an inspiration. When I was a boy, one of the great TV programs I really enjoyed, back in the 1960s, was Robert Hoffman playing the character of Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is an inspiration, and Daniel Defoe, who wrote the book, is also a really interesting character. So Daniel Defoe was born in London, in the parish of St Giles in Cripplegate, around the year 1660. That means when he was around about 5 years of age, London was visited by the Great Plague. 70,000 people died. That's maybe between 30 and 40% of the entire population. The year later, the Great Fire came, and the home in which Defoe lived along with his family was one of only two that was left untouched by the fire in the area where he was living. Later on, Defoe had a varied career as a pamphleteer, a merchant. He experienced bankruptcy, was pilloried. That means he had to stand with his feet unable to move, and people were able to throw rotten fruit and rubbish at him. According to the tradition that's come down, though, his friends surrounded him and they threw flowers rather than fruit. Someone commented that Defoe was the only man who was able to stand in the stocks and then rise to a position of eminence within the country. But he came from a Christian family, and his reflections on his own life are portrayed in some measure in the story of Robinson Crusoe. Sets out on this journey trying to make himself and ends up in problems as a result. Shipwrecked once, involved in slavery, and then shipwrecked a second time. He finds himself a castaway, the only occupant of what would otherwise be a wonderful desert island, able to sustain him, but cut off from everyone else. And he stayed there for 28 long years. 9 months after the shipwreck, he went through a period of illness, and a fever came upon him. As he lay there, he remembered that he had a chest in which there was some tobacco, and he'd heard that the tobacco could be helpful. So Robinson Crusoe went and found this tobacco, and while he was there, he spotted a Bible. He opened the Bible at random, and the verse that caught his attention said, "Call on me in the time of trouble, and I will hear you and deliver you, and you will glorify me." That text became the turning point in his whole life. First, he kind of contracted with God. He said he went back and prayed for the first time in many a year. He asked God to deliver him from this sickness, understanding that in time he would come to glorify God as a consequence. He slept, and the next day he awoke well. God had delivered him. It was some period later that the text came knocking on his door again, and this time he realized that it wasn't sickness he needed to be delivered from, but his sin.
Now I learn to take deliverance in another sense. Now I looked upon my past life with such horror, and my sins appeared so dreadful, that my soul sought nothing of God but deliverance from the load of guilt that bore down all my comfort. As for my solitary life, it was nothing. I did not so much pray to be delivered from it, or think of it. It was of no consideration in comparison with this. And I add this part here to hint to whoever shall read it, that whenever they come to a true sense of things, they will find deliverance from sin a much greater blessing than deliverance from affliction.
11 years later, Robinson Crusoe felt the impact of this text a third time. Around noon one day, suddenly, without any expectation, as he was walking along the beach, he saw the imprint of a human foot. He was in such a sense of shock and terror. He thought someone had come to take his life, that he ran straight back to his shack, scared even to look outside at first. But then, venturing forth, he saw that there were cannibals, and he prayed again that God would deliver him. God not only delivered him from the savages that he saw on the beach, but they left him one of his greatest treasures on earth, a friend, a bosom companion, Man Friday. God delivered him from that solitude and brought him into a whole new companionship. That was a wonderful thing for him. Robinson Crusoe was on the island for a total of 28 years. No one's predicting that coronavirus will last that long. But during Crusoe's time on the island, in complete solitude, he learnt these two invaluable lessons: to listen to God and to speak to God. Daily, he would take the Bible that started this whole relationship, open it up before him, and read. He wasn't looking so much for an education or information as to let God speak, the living God speaking into his soul, nourishing him, encouraging him, directing him. And then he poured out his concerns to God, his guilt, his grief, his fears and anxieties, his needs. He learned to share with God the troubles that he had about the way things had worked out in his life. He talked it all through with God. God became his best friend, his closest companion. And that was satisfying for Robinson Crusoe. During this period where we are self-isolating, let's listen to the voice of God and let him speak into our lives. And let's learn to speak to God, to tell him everything, and to trust in him. He will bring us through, and he will bring us through better as a result of our attention to him. May God bless us in this time.